So we're winding down the year, and what better way to do it than with an extremely odd and slightly apocalyptic quirky comedy? White Noise had a small release in theaters, and then it's coming to Netflix. But is it worth watching? White Noise follows a contemporary American family's attempt to deal with the mundane conflicts of everyday life while grappling with the universal mysteries of love, death, and the possibility of happiness in an uncertain world. Adam Driver pairs up with his Marriage Story director Noah Baumbach, and he's joined then by Greta Gerwig and Don Cheadle. Now, Gerwig also has worked with Baumbach, so the team works really well together to execute this somewhat absurdist and satirical look at a family who's experiencing a sort of existential crisis during a disaster. Now, the way this is put together is chaotic and noisy, which is fitting for the title. The dialogue is consistently overlapping and seemingly just stream of consciousness, even though it does have a rhythm to the deliveries. The conversations are a bit hard to discern meaning from at times, but when a scene is taken as a whole, the words all come together to give a cohesive narrative for that particular sequence. This also has some dark comedy in it, which is more amusing than laugh out loud, but there was one moment where I did audibly laugh because the conversation that was taking place, it captured a family's interaction just perfectly. The family's car had just careened into this river, and the exchanges that take place between the adults and the kids, they are classic and utterly accurate. There is a somewhat absurdist tone to some of what we see, and even sometimes the movie feels very pretentious as it's going about the story. But within these types of scenes, there is smartly written dialogue that builds an intensity and excitement. Now, at one point, Adam Driver's character, who is a professor of Hitler studies, he's asked to join Don Cheadle's class about Elvis. Now, Cheadle and Driver, they tag team in their deliveries with mounting enthusiasm. And the professors, they're then almost elevated to rock star status by the students as they conclude their lecture. Now, this felt a little bit like the math class scene in Better Off Dead, when Vincent Schiavelli is discussing this complex math equation and the class just erupts into laughter and applause. The sentiment doesn't fit with the expectations, but it absolutely worked. Now, the acting in this is wonderful, with performances that are captivating because of how quirky and stunted the portrayals are. Greta Gerwig is excellent as this mom who's semi-secretly dealing with some issues. I mean, she's evasive and enigmatic, but also wrapped up in worry and anxiety, which could be justified or could just be blown out of proportion. Now, Adam Driver, he's also outstanding with his timid and uncertain persona. I mean, it's almost like he's afraid to fully commit to any one idea, outside, though, of his knowledge within his classroom. The interactions that he has with his kids, they're heady and open, but they feel more like friends discussing something rather than a parent-child relationship. Don Cheadle isn't in this as much as Gerwig and Driver, but he excels at crafting a confident but insecure professor who is cagey and very strange. Now, he's a bit obsessive, but more than that, he comes across as an intellectual snob, fitting in perfectly with Driver, who is the same when it comes to his educational topic. Now, there's a point in the film where a disaster ensues and the family is forced to evacuate. And this plays then heavily into any anxieties and fears the family members have, which then exacerbates them to almost the breaking point. But what's really funny is that not all of the family reacts poorly to the situations. Some view it pragmatically and they use it as the impetus to show off their knowledge. Now, during this portion of the movie, there were also some slight similarities to excellent sci-fi movies, like Close Encounters and Super 8. Now, it's not like these storylines were being shared from those movies, but just parts of how the scenes were executed that really felt like they got the inspiration from those movies. Now, from a technical standpoint, this is an awesome movie to view. The cinematography is enveloping, and it provides some very intimate framings that made me feel up close and personal with the characters. The set designs are also outstanding to take in, as the clothing and the furniture really transport us back to the early 80s. There are a lot of earth tones featured, and the eccentricities of the characters are captured in their choice of clothing. Now, one thing that has nothing to do with anything, other than it is something that I noticed, is that Sam Nivola, who plays the oldest son within the family, if you're not looking at him while he's speaking, he sounds exactly like Jesse Eisenberg. I mean, it's crazy how similar his voice and speech patterns are. Okay, so this is one of those movies that I'm really just emotionally confused about. I'm not quite sure where I land within my feelings. From the technical and the storytelling aspect, this is expertly made and it's beautiful to view. The performances are curious and eccentric, reinforcing the existential crises we watch play out among the characters. There's humor, satire, and absurdity that all work together to keep us off balance while creating intrigue about what's going on. And then the writing is smart and quick, bordering on pretentious, but very intelligent nonetheless. But then there's the enjoyment question. Did I actually like watching this? And this is where I'm torn. I mean, I didn't dislike this by any means, but I also didn't love it. It's a bit long at 2 hours and 16 minutes, but then I wasn't bored, just perplexed at times about why I was watching. I think overall, if you like quirky and odd, but something that's not so off the wall that it's inaccessible, white noise may bring you a lot of enjoyment. There's not really any sex, some brief nudity, a little bit of profanity, and some violence. I give White Noise 4 out of 5 couches. Now, I'm not sure I'm going to rewatch this, but that doesn't take away from the actual execution of the movie. What's something odd that you've watched recently? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.